The former Garrison Theatre, now the Study Centre, was a hive of activity earlier this year when plans were exhibited for the new Garrison in Colchester. Display panels and a model showed the layout and proposals. Colchester folk gathered to see the impact to the area, and we spoke to Charles Barrington of our MPA, the developers, about the launch.
This is the launch of the outline scheme for the whole Garrison redevelopment, and what our MPA are doing is that we are building the new Garrison as partners with the Army, and in order to fund that we will be putting forward a plan to sell the areas which will no longer be used by the Army, and that will of course fund the construction of the new Garrison.
But it's not just about today, is it? Because winding back the clock a year back, discussions were underway with workshops.
Absolutely. We had workshops in this room a year ago, and we had 176 people turn up at those workshops, of which I think 40 were then invited back for focus groups 8 months later. And if you go around the exhibition, you'll see the boards which show the findings of the focus groups, and all of those findings have been built into this scheme.
Now, an exciting day for Colchester, and the big one, really. This is the largest development, isn't it, for southern England?
I'm not sure the largest. It's certainly one of the largest urban redevelopment schemes in the south of England. It's hugely important to Colchester. It preserves all of the jobs in Colchester, and we've all seen the publicity about jobs over the last few days. It creates new jobs in terms of the retail and other commercial activities that will take place on this site when it gets developed. And it secures the future of the British Army in Colchester for the next 35 years at least.
So we have a garrison for the 21st century. Tell me about the development then, Charles. Can you take us through on a blow-by-blow account of what's going to happen to Abbey Fields, Flagstaff House, the work?
We are delivering a outline planning consent with CBC, hopefully by the middle of this year. What will happen is that we will then sell that surplus land to developers, whether that be housing developers or others, and they will put in their own detailed plans. But the outline consent that we obtain will state the use that all of that land can be put to. It will cover the traffic and issues that will need to be dealt with in the context of that development. It will talk about the way in which we move the whole development into the centre of Colchester, and it will consider things like listed buildings, cycleways, green links, and all of the sorts of things that you would expect to be part of a big development like this.
Now we're going to see houses, shops, we're going to see new vistas, walkways through to the town centre. A really exciting and quite a long-term scheme, isn't it, John?
It's a long-term scheme because, of course, we can't take the old barracks and sell them until we've built the new barracks and moved the soldiers from the old barracks into the new barracks. And that will take 3.5 to 4 years. And then building out those sites after that will probably take another 5 years after that. So we're talking about 10 years in the total life of this scheme.
Talk to me about the Abbey Fields then. What's going to happen to Abbey Fields long term?
Abbey Field will remain a green core to this whole site, and of course the most important areas to be developed are in a crescent around Abbey Field, and will also form a natural funnel, as it were, into the centre of the town. And we hope to enhance that access into the town with much better pedestrian and cycle and bus access into the town from there. Perhaps a new little town square here in the Flagstaff House area. We'll try to close Abbey Gate to traffic so that becomes pedestrianised, and also enhance the public open space in the Officers' Club area, the old Rose Garden, which I'm sure you know about. And make that a very much more attractive way of accessing the town from this side.
What about the cavalry barracks?
There are a number of extremely interesting buildings which Blackadder fans will of course recognise from the opening sequence. Those buildings are likely to be preserved and have been noted for listing because they're extremely important examples of Victorian military architecture.
And the other side of the site, right down the bottom of the map there, what's going to happen? I mean, is it going to be a complete new development, bulldozing down of buildings and flattening of land? What's going to happen?
The new Garrison site here, which is like a great big figure of 8, The interesting thing about that site is it will be self-contained. So unlike the present Garrison, which requires traffic to move sort of all over this part of the town, the Garrison traffic will be retained very much within its own site. And the idea is to move the heavy vehicles out at the bottom at the south, so they will not go into the town in the way that they have to go through Southway, etc. at the moment. So that should make traffic access a lot easier for the new Garrison. But yes, this will be a completely, the first new Garrison site the British Army has built, I think, for 100 years. With a residential area, the sort of civic area where the main mess and headquarters buildings are, and the technical and industrial areas. So it's a very comprehensive and extensive development.
Now, there have been some worries locally about the amount of traffic that might build up in this rather small area because there aren't that many roads at the moment. Are you looking at improving the road network around here?
One of the things that I know that Colchester Borough Council has in mind is improving the road access, particularly in the Mersey Road area down the well-known bottleneck, perhaps by using some form of gyratory system. Also, because, as I mentioned, if the heavy vehicles come out at the south of the site, then they can go off towards Stanway and not have to go back through the centre of town. So hopefully that will be a big improvement.
One question about preserving buildings we've covered, but what about the idea of a museum of military for Colchester? Has anybody discussed that at all?
Well, that's a very interesting point, and several people who came to the focus group said that they wanted to see a museum, and there are several candidate buildings, including the old Garrison Church, which is a very beautiful building, as you know. The difficulty is that one of the people who wants the museum is the Paras, and they want to put an aeroplane into it. And I'm not sure we're going to be able to get an aeroplane into the Garrison Church, so that's a bit of an issue. But a lot of people would like to see a museum, and one of the obvious uses for one of the listed buildings to be retained would be a museum, yes.
Well, 2 days in January 2001 have been busy days, have they?
We had 450 people here yesterday. It's busy here again today, as you can see, and we're absolutely delighted because we think that that's a very good sign that there are a lot of people in Colchester interested in this, and from the feedback we're getting, quite enthusiastic about it.
And finally, Charles, what's the way forward? Is it now for the Borough Council to decide and put the rubber stamp of OK to the plans?
The Borough Council, with whom we registered this application formally on the 2nd of January, are due to deliver a decision, we hope, in the middle of the year, which will allow us to then close our contract with the Ministry of Defence, and we should be in business by the end of this year.
When will we see the first movement of earth and the first developments?
Probably at the very beginning of next year. But if we do what we hope to do, which is sign the whole thing up towards the end of this year, then you might start to see some site preparation and fencing works towards the end of this year.
Jim, your reaction to today?
The exhibition is interesting. It shows exactly what's happening to the military side with the development of the barracks, but it doesn't seem to tell you what's going to happen to the results of this development, the consequences. For example, what's going to happen to the transport from Miani and the Hyderabad barracks area when they redevelop that with housing? How will they get down the Mersey Road where you can't even get two buses past one another? That's my big concern around there. And is there any indication whatsoever of park and ride, because they're taking away two of the car parks that they use? That's the sort of thing. It fails to answer it.
Well, I think the exhibition is good. I think it could be improved by having more space so we can actually read what we're trying to read. With all the people in here, you can't actually read it.
And what about the scheme?
Well, I think the Garrison does need rebuilding. The soldiers need looking after in a better way than what they are housed now. But the links into the town, I think that's going to be the difficult area as far as public access, military access moving in and out, etc. I think that's the problem area.
Do you live locally?
Yeah.
How local?
Pretty gate.
So you are well aware of the problems here?
The traffic problems, yeah. Yeah, and I work in the Garrison as well.
It's going to be a very nice development for the Army, but as the public stand, I don't think it's going to do us a lot of favours at all.
What doesn't it do?
It doesn't address any transport problems that are already existing There are no new roads going from the new housing developments into the town, so where's all the traffic going to go?